Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the start of a new series here on the channel, and the name is pretty simple. Is this pilot actually good? And what we're going to be doing is Jess and I are going to look at a lot of really notable TV pilots. Some of them may be shows that are off the air now, some may still be on the air now, and we're going to try to just isolate ourselves in as much of a pilot bubble as we can.
Yeah, I mean, we'll disclose to you guys if we've seen this pilot before, if we've actually watched the entire series, or if we haven't. It's not really about is the pilot and the entire series all make sense. It's really about if you watch this pilot today, would you watch the rest of the show? And that's sort of where we're going. Is this pilot actually good? And if we've got some pilots that we want to go over and some shows we want to go over, but if there's any pilots that you're interested in, leave a comment below so that we can take a look.
And for this being the first episode, we decided we'd be here for you, and we would start with the pilot of Friends, because Friends, to this day, I think is probably one of the 2 or 3 most streamed comedies out there ever. I mean, you've got streaming services that are using it as a cornerstone of a launch lineup. It has a lot to talk about. Just from this pilot alone, I think there's a lot of things that work. There's a lot of things that I don't know if they work great in 2020, but I think this is a really fun way to kick things off. And before we do, if you guys do like this video, give us a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other updates we've got coming up.
Okay, so let's start out simple. Let's talk about the theme song. This theme song to me is still iconic. It is still catchy. I watched the pilot yesterday and I've been singing this song for 24 hours now. It still has that same feeling when I first saw this pilot years back. Now, I'm not a huge Friends fan. I enjoyed the show a lot, but I wasn't someone who went out and got the Rachel haircut. That was really iconic at that time, and lots of people were doing that because it was super modern. I wasn't that bold. But yeah, I mean, it still holds up to me.
I did get the Rachel haircut. Wait, I'm joking. Yeah, this really allows for a lot of iconic 90s haircuts. But no, Friends was on from, I believe, I looked it up, 1994 to 2004. It has a long run on television, and to me, this is inside the weird psychological mind of Matt, but this was a show where I was in high school at the very end of the run, and it felt a lot like it was the show a lot of the popular kids watched, and I was just like, I don't know if I'm cool enough to watch Friends, so I never really got that much into it, and I've seen probably a handful of episodes over the years, but I had never seen the pilot before, but I do think the theme song is great. It is fun, it's memorable, it's got a cool location. I'm sure there have been about 1 million tourists who have tried to dance around in this fountain at this point.
Absolutely. I mean, the opening sequence is really iconic as well. I mean, it has been spoofed 1 million times over the years as well on TV. We've seen it everywhere.
Let's just put it like this. If you can have your theme song be impersonated by fans trying to recreate it with other shows, I'm pretty sure I've seen 3 or 4 other shows have their own, Friends theme song. I think you're doing something right. It's a good, just right in, get this out of the way. It's fun. It gets you excited for the show.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the plot setup, because for me, a really good pilot is gonna let you know what this show is about. You shouldn't leave a pilot and not know what just happened or where kind of the direction of the show is going, at least to a small extent. I think that this show did a very good job of setting up what this show is about. It is about friends, and it is about relationships. And it's about old friendships, plus bringing in Rachel, who's, someone that Monica knew in the past, but is now going to become a newer, better friend sort of thing. So as far as just what is the plot of this show? Yeah, it's about friends. It's about relationships, and they covered all of it.
I always like to think of this in this way, because I have my character of Network Executive Man, who I feel Network Executive Man's going to get a lot of play in this series.
I think so too. All right, let's bring him out.
All right, so I need you to tell me in just one sentence what your show is about, because I have 800 other meetings and then I need to go and watch my family play polo with horses. No, so this... I think a good show, you need to be able to go into a pitch meeting with Network Executive Man and be able to sell it very, very quickly. And I think this is the pitch to Friends, and you pretty much nailed it. I would add in there New York. So I would say it is about a group of friends and the relationships they have in New York, period.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's simple enough of a concept but enough people are going to get it. So if you're not really into relationships, you can still have the friendship part of it, and everybody's got their friends. If you're a little less interested in the friends, a little more into the relationship, definitely the show had all kinds of different things. They set up that Joey's kind of a player, Chandler's kind of on his own, Monica's really trying to find her footing with Wine Guy, and then we have Ross and Rachel. Of course, they've both just gotten out of major relationships. Ross has just gotten out of his marriage, and Rachel has left her man at the altar. So they're both kind of in very similar situations where they've both left really intense, serious relationships.
I think if they were allowed another sentence about the show, I think they would go into some of what the idea is here, because there are approximately, especially at this point, about 30 different sitcoms that were all about people in New York. But I think what Friends sort of nails, it is that ability to cater to people who are around this age at this time, where maybe they had a friend who was like Ross, who had just gone through a really devastating breakup, or maybe they knew, the quirky person in their friend group, like a Phoebe. And I feel like it's relatable. I can still, even today in 2020, I think the part of it where I can see myself in certain characters on this show, like I think it plays fairly well. I think some of them, especially in the pilot, are a little one note, but I think it is more relatable than at least some other sitcoms where it just feels like, oh, I'm the crazy guy coming into the scene.
Yeah, no, they do a really good job of making each character someone that someone can probably relate to. Like when I watched Phoebe trying to recreate a song and missing words and adding in her own, I was like, oh man, I do that all the time.
Yeah, I feel like I am more with the neuroses. I'm probably more Ross than anyone else on this show, but I think there's a little bit of everyone, because I relate to Chandler a little bit. I do not relate to Joey at all, but I think the premise of the show holds up really well. Really, to me, the thing that ages just the best about it is the cast. I think if you plug in different people, I don't know if the show works, because there are dozens of Friends in New York shows, but Jennifer Aniston, I think, is the star of the pilot. I think she is really, really good. She's funny. She also plays the heartache really well. I think David Schwimmer, also phenomenal in the pilot.
Yeah, I can't see this show with anybody else. And obviously, we've watched this show. A lot of us have watched this show a lot. You get really invested in them. Now I see Matthew Perry, and he's just Chandler Bing forever. And that's good for the show. It's not necessarily good for him as an actor, but, it is good for the show because it's an iconic character, and he embodied that character so well that he is now Chandler Bing forever.
And I think... it is, like you said, it's not a great thing for some of the actors that they're associated with these characters forever, but I think at the same time, it shows exactly why Friends work so well, because it wasn't just about the individuals, it was about sort of the mix of them, because, Courtney Cox has had some success away from the show.
Yeah.
She had Cougar Town for a while, and Jennifer Aniston
And she was in the Scream movies.
Yeah, and Jennifer Aniston's had some stuff. All these people have done other things, but there is just magic about sort of getting them in the same place, the chemistry between all of them. It feels in the pilot like they have actually, at least some of these characters have been friends, and there's a rapport, and I think it needed to be lights out at this point in order to stick around because there was so much other stuff out there. And I think a lot of comedies, even ones that we love, it takes them a little bit of time to find that camaraderie.
I agree. Having a comedy and stepping out on the right foot right away, not easy. The other thing that this pilot did really well is set up the Ross and Rachel relationship. And if you have not seen this show, you know about this relationship. Later in the series, as it was all going on and the whole, we were on a break, that was everywhere.
Yes.
Everywhere. If you didn't see the show, you knew that this was happening on this show. It was such a huge TV moment in TV history.
Yeah, I knew of that, and I was not a Friends viewer. I was familiar with that.
Yeah, so they did do a very good job at the beginning. They've established that Ross and Rachel had known each other in high school. They weren't close. They didn't really spend a lot of time together. He had a crush on her. She knew about it. She wasn't interested. Now it's, they set up that maybe down the line he's going to ask her out.
Well, yeah, and we certainly, even me, I know a little bit about where it goes, but they do have you sort of rooting for the two of them right away, which I think is really, really great. And, if we're going to move into some stuff that doesn't work as great about the pilot, they have
it's that time.
There's a lot of stuff here, but we can still say that Friends is a great pilot, and I think it is a legitimately great pilot. But
there was a lot of stuff that worked. There was a couple things that didn't, but there was a lot of stuff that worked.
Yeah, and one thing I didn't mention that I probably should have is I like how quick they sort of cut between different scenes and they wove in all the storylines. It felt like there was a lot going on, and it never felt crowded. It just always felt like they were building, and they didn't put a lot of just fluff in there.
Yeah, so one of the things that did not work for me, and has not worked in any other show that's tried to do this, is to have really young people with these incredible apartments in New York City, like Monica, who's got a 2-bedroom, no roommate, in this giant apartment and is working as a chef. Unless she's a chef at Nobu, then I don't know how she's affording this apartment by herself. Or even across the hall, we've got Chandler, we got Joey. Their apartment is not as huge and fabulous, but it is still New York City, and Joey is an out-of-work actor, so I'm not exactly sure how they're affording this, and it takes away a little bit of the believability when it's like, oh yeah, this is fun and enjoying everybody, and then I'll see Monica at work and I'll be like, how does she afford this place?
I think the believability of all 90s sitcoms with people in New York affording their apartments is just a consistent, it's always completely unbelievable and ridiculous. It sort of just becomes that maybe there is a magical street in Manhattan or pick your borough where all sitcom characters live, and rent just so happens to be very, very cheap there.
Yeah, I mean, for all the people who love Carrie Bradshaw, yeah, we had the same issue over there. She was a writer. She was living in New York City. She does a column like once a week, but somehow afforded that apartment. They tried to kind of be like, oh, well, it's rent controlled. Just the same. I mean, come on.
Is this where we have the coffee conversation? Because I feel like we need to have the coffee conversation.
Let's have it.
I do love the fact that they have Central Perk like right away on Friends. It's their beloved location.
Yep.
I think Central Perk is like at least 50% responsible for the rise in coffee shops all around the country.
Oh, for sure.
Now, the fact of the matter is, I spend an unhealthy amount of time watching people try to drink this coffee, because this is a very big pet peeve for me, is everyone with the coffee cups. There's a lot of people on TV who kind of carry them like there's nothing in them, and you can tell. And with these people, you've got like Monica just like dangling the cup over. It's like, this thing has nothing in it, and they're like, they're tipping it around, and I'm like looking in to see, okay, it's like, unless the people at Central Perk are some of the worst baristas of all time, and they're filling up your coffee mugs to like that, there is like a problem going on here. No, wait, I got more. You have the scene later where Rachel has served them coffee in the place, and he dumps it into the plant. I took a close look. That was water. I saw the water coming out of that mug. That was not coffee.
Yeah, somebody did not. Continuity was dropping the ball that day. Yeah, I agree. And those are such really simple continuity things that are easy to take care of, because I've never been on a TV set or a movie set that does not have a craft table that has a coffee machine on it. Like, at the worst, go to craft services, take the coffee machine, fill up the cups.
Maybe they were worried that the actors were going to start drinking it, and then you would just be like, "Hi, I'm Chandler. Nice to meet you. Let's do the scenes together." Like, I don't know.
There's decaf.
That is true. That is true. Can we? Okay, I think most of Friends ages really well, at least in terms of it making sense. I will say I had forgotten it came out as early as '94, and I'm watching these hairdos, and I'm like, yeah, this is not a show where people would wear these hairdos now.
Joey's hair was something else, and I remember back in the 90s that was really popular, and that was really interesting about this show, like the idea of the Jennifer Aniston haircut. Like, that was such a modern haircut that was really not around before her. But that Joey haircut, man, everybody had it. They loved it. It was really popular.
Oh yeah, I at least saw 50 people with the Joey haircut from like 2000 until like even like 2005, 2006. Like, that was still going really, really strong. This is something that doesn't age well just because it is really a relic of the times. Mm-hmm. There's this moment in the pilot where you hear the Star Spangled Banner play on TV and people like wake up and they're like surprised by it. In the olden days, at the end of TV programming, and this probably by the time Friends is over, they wouldn't even do this, mm-hmm. networks would play the Star Spangled Banner, and then that would just be sort of it for the day. I think if you are either not American or you are like Jess, or
yeah, I wouldn't have gotten any of this. I mean, I'm Canadian. This wouldn't have been a thing that I would have known about.
Yeah, there's probably a bunch of like 20-year-olds who are watching Friends and are just like, why are they all listening to the Star Spangled Banner in this moment? It does not age well.
Yeah, and I'll say let's talk about the comedy of it all, because, I mean, this is a comedy. So some of the jokes still landed all right. I mean, some of Chandler's stuff was still pretty biting. Some of it didn't, where I was kind of like, I could feel what the next line was going to be, and it just didn't land the way that it did. We had them all watching the Spanish soap opera, and they're making comments about this woman's body. That doesn't age well at all. So, I mean, some of it just didn't land anymore as far as the comedy. The concept still worked, but if this was a show that was now out in 2020, obviously the comedy would be different, because back then that comedy worked, and it worked for that generation, and that was a lot of what was going on at that time that people thought was funny. Comedy really changes as the world changes and what people think is funny, and of course it's subjective as well.
Yeah, that is one of the things that I think is going to be interesting as we go through a lot of this, because there are a ton of shows. We could probably think about 10 right now that have things that don't necessarily look that great in 2020 versus when it happened, but they were a part of that era. That's the way that comedy happened at that point. What was funny then isn't funny now. I don't think we should cancel Friends because of some off-color things, but I think they're worth pointing out, saying, okay, this is something not too great altogether now. Like, this one's not particularly just like, salacious or anything, but Monica spitting out the water, I'm just like, have we not seen that 2,000 times?
And the thing is you could see her like going like this, waiting for him to say that line. I was just like, okay, we know it's coming because you're holding this cup like this, waiting, here it goes. I was just like, okay, all right. That's what I sort of mean by like, you could tell that they were setting up the joke and then joke happens, sort of thing. The last thing that I want to talk about is the character of Phoebe, who ended up, for me, being a character I really liked on the show. But in this pilot alone, it felt like they did not know what to do with her. She was clearly one of the friends, but she didn't really fit in as one of the friends. And she was just kind of saying things randomly that sometimes weren't just fitting in with anything. And it felt like they knew they wanted to have a quirky character. They didn't know what to do with her yet. And it kind of reminded me of Toby over on The Office. If you watch the first 2 episodes of The Office, they didn't know what to do with him. They did not clearly make it out that he was the HR guy and that he was like the uptight HR guy. He was not that in the first 2 episodes at all. So that's kind of what it feels like here, that they just don't know where to land with her yet. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it was just kind of a strange thing because everyone else felt really fleshed out. And then there was Phoebe.
You know what it felt like to me? It felt like, and I've been this person, so I'm not trying to say bad things about them. It is a lot of times when you have that gathering of friends, you have that one person who's there who's just a little bit weird, and it's sort of like, oh, this is Bob's friend. Bob invited them, nobody else. And it felt a little bit like that, and I've been that person, so I know what it's like. It's just, it felt like Phoebe wasn't quite fitting in fully. She will get there. I like Phoebe as a character, too. I think she's weird and interesting, and so...
And we've seen so many people over the years try to replicate that character on other shows, the fun, quirky, whatever, and they never stick the landing like Phoebe. She really did. The character is really iconic, and it did start this sort of, oh, this kind of character can work on TV. Well, let's try to duplicate it.
They don't have Lisa Kudrow. I mean, you got to have Lisa Kudrow, and you got to have the right writing to pull it off, and that's what Phoebe ultimately does. So I think one of the last things we should kind of talk about in a lot of these videos is, you know, Friends goes on to be on TV for almost a decade, but in watching the pilot, can you see another 8 seasons, 9 seasons coming from this? Do you actually think that this is a show that could go on for so long and work?
No, I think that there is only so many stories you can tell within this group of 6 people before it starts to get really stale. I mean, what I will say though is, as a question to all of you guys as well as us, is this a pilot that if we watched it, would you watch any more of it?
And I think the answer would be yes. I would. It's a weird situation, because if we were to sit here and go through and say, if Friends was on and premiering in 2020, would it be the same success that it was, you know, a good more than 2 decades ago? I don't know if it would be, just because it's really hard to have a sitcom do super well. Like, what was the last huge sitcom? The Big Bang Theory?
It's true, but on the same side, there are a lot of shows about relationships like This Is Us. It's not a comedy, but there's lots of shows, you know, A Million Little Things, that are just about relationships and friendships and that type of thing. So this is a plot that works really well. It's like, oh man, another cop show, and then you get into it and you're like, now I have 12 cop shows that I watch. It's sort of like taking that same plot but making it something else. And for me, just watching the pilot, if I didn't know anything else about the show, it is a show that I would watch the next episode.
I would too, and I think if it came on in 2020, I feel like Friends would be like a 7-season, maybe a 13 to 16 episode comedy you would have on a streaming service or HBO or FX, where they'd be a little bit edgier because they would be thinking, oh, the young people, the millennials who we need to get, it's got to be more extreme, and that's where I think they would be going if it was today. I could be wrong.
So is the pilot actually good?
I think it is. I think it is a really, really good pilot. I think it's funny. I don't think everything is great in 2020, but very few things are. I enjoyed it a lot, and you have seen it before. I have not.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the pilot is actually good. It does its job. It sets out who these characters are, what this show is about, and exactly what you can expect from this show. So if you're looking for something along those lines, this would then be, you get what you get in the pilot, you get it for the rest.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this, because this was a lot of fun to do, and we've got, like we said, a lot of other shows planning that we're going to be coming on and talking a little bit about. But let's ask you guys, especially if you've seen the Friends pilot recently, is this pilot actually good to you? Does it really set the stage for everything else? Would you watch it if it was new in 2020? Share in the comments, and if you did like this video, give us a like, subscribe, and you can support us further by checking the link in the description to the store, and we'll see you here next time.